Afternoon, everybody. Thank you for joining us. We are going to get started in just a moment. We'll give everyone a chance to filter in. But if you want to take a moment and find the chat box, you can start us off by saying where you're joining from, please. Mother Charlottesville. Well, good morning to some of you. I said afternoon, I think that's California. A couple of Rochesters. I'm from Rochester. Shout out to Rochester. Hi, Monica. You see, I'm actually reading these because I saw your name in there. Folks from all over. California, Texas, New Orleans. All right, well, we have a lot to try to cover today. So I'm going to get started, and I'm sure people will keep joining us. So feel free to continue to find the chat box and continue to share where you're from. But today we are going to have a wonderful webinar for you today with a bunch of local experts and really a chance to hear sort of stories from the field and what's working, maybe what's hard. So this is Interactions at the Core, the life-changing power of interactions in any setting. Just a couple quick housekeeping notes. This is being recorded. It will be shared out. We'll send an email tomorrow as soon as the video and resources are processed, and you'll have access to the recording. And then if you click on the link in the email, you'll also see a downloadable certificate of attendance, and any of the resources that we sort of mention or go over today will be all on that same landing page. And so if you miss anything, that's okay. No need to take notes. It'll all be in there tomorrow. And let's move on. So a little bit about Teachstone. We are an education company. We're here in Charlottesville, Virginia, but now here means a lot less. We're sort of everywhere. And we are most known for being the publishers of the class tool, work with educators in all 50 states and around the globe. That picture is our colleague JJ in Peru. And the goal is helping every child reach their full potential and doing that by measuring and improving interactions. So let's take a quick poll to get a sense of sort of where you are in your class journey or in your class knowledge. I'm gonna put a poll up, and if you can share with us a little bit about your knowledge of class, and we'll just give everybody a minute. We've got a good range here. So far I see about 20% don't know a lot about class, 15% familiar with class but don't use it, 15% use class to collect data, and now I see about just over 50% that use class for assessment and professional development, which is wonderful. That's the goal. Everybody, just another second here. All right, so we ended up with about 50% of you use class for professional development and assessment, and a good 20% that don't know a whole lot about class, and that is okay, we're gonna, the content will be good for everybody along that spectrum. So briefly, what is CLASS? CLASS stands for the Classroom Assessment Scoring System. It's the leading system for measuring and improving teaching quality and interactions. We specifically are looking at measuring effective teacher-child interactions. And if you have some time on your hand and want to dive into some research, there's lots of studies on our website. It is, has been highly researched and has over 200 research studies that you can find. And more importantly, I think what we really want to say today is, like, are interactions going to be harder this fall? Yes. You know, will it be harder on children and teachers and families? Yes. But that what we know is that interactions are at the core of great teaching, and regardless of whether children are in the classroom but maybe wearing masks and social distancing or physical distancing, or if they're learning with remote learning at home, or if there's a program to sort of support families in supporting young learners, the interactions are at the core of that. And so what we're hoping to share today is ways to have high quality interactions. So another quick poll for you. Actually, if you could chat into the chat, what is your role? Teacher, coach, mentor, administrator, or observer?
I see lots of coaches and teachers.
Yeah, that's wonderful. Lots of teachers. Oh, it's great to see. Well, thank you all for joining. And here is the poll I was referring to. So another just quick check-in. How are you doing today? We all sort of checked in with each other before hitting broadcast, and there was a range of excitement and stress and overwhelmed feelings. And so if a 1 is, ooh, I am not doing so well today, and a 5 is, actually I'm doing great, where do you fall on that? You guys are pretty happy today. So far I see 27%, 5 out of 5, 45%, a 4 out of 5. Apprehensive, that's a good word. All right, we'll just do one more minute. Well, the good news is a total of only 3% of you are 1 or a 2. And hopefully after some good strategies and resources in our conversation today, you will maybe bump yourselves up to a 2 or a 3 or maybe a 4. All right. And my last question, another, if you can go back into the chat box, the conversation today is going to try and address lots of needs, but we only have 45 minutes. So I'd love to just sort of hear, what are your biggest concerns about this year?
I see social emotional learning. I know we've been hearing a lot of that. Virtual learning, family engagement.
Connecting with families.
Masks, social distancing. The good thing is I think we won't cover it all, but I think we'll have an opportunity to talk about a lot of this, Liz.
Wonderful. We certainly have a lot. All right. Well, I am going to move right along and introduce those of you who you'll see in just a moment. So Bridget Hamry, our CEO, is also co-founder of Class and TeachZone. Will be sort of facilitating the discussion. And Bridget, do you want to take a moment and introduce?
Sure. Hi, everyone. Whether it's morning or afternoon, we're so happy that you are spending a little bit of time with us. And my job for today is really just to get out of the way and let us hear from some of these folks, as our esteemed colleagues from across the country who really, alongside you, been doing this work over the last months and as we sort of open to a new year. So without further ado, I'm actually going to introduce them more formally in just a moment. But one of the things we always say at TeachZone is that seeing teaching transforms teaching. And we spend a lot of our time working to make sure we have good video to help people really see what great teaching looks like. As you can imagine, over the past few months, that has turned to thinking about, well, what does good teaching look like in socially distanced classrooms? What does good teaching look like when we're online? And it's been a lot harder to get examples of that. So just last week, one of our amazing professional services staff, Marnetta, who is a teacher, a coach, just an amazing human, actually did some sessions with some of our colleagues' kids. My 6-year-old twins were there. And took on this challenge of trying to develop some exemplars for us. So we thought we would just start and ground us in this conversation with a few minutes spent with an early child.
And so now we have left the bird, the bunny, the giraffe, the cow, and the cat. Which one are we doing next? Cat! Okay, so we're going to do the cat. So what is the cat doing? See the cat? Let me see you do the cat. So we're doing the cat, this one. I see you, Yardley, the cat. I see you, Wyatt. You did exactly the cat. Rome is still doing it in his chair very successfully. I see you, Julia and Lucia. Great job, Millie. Freya, you guys are good at yoga. So we've already... I'm going to do the cow. Oh, so now we're going to do the cow. I had a request for the cow. So here's the cow. And what is the boy doing? If it's a cow, what sound should we be making? So I want to hear it. Let me see the cow, and I want to hear you mooing. So let me see your bodies in the shape of a cow.
Thanks, Liz. Well, one of the things that I love about that video is I think it helps ground us in a moment of empathy for everyone in this moment, for teachers, for children, for parents who are there trying to facilitate. We know this is just a completely new normal for all of us. And I was saying earlier, one of the things I'm deeply appreciative about the job that I have is making sure that I enter this with empathy for everyone, and particularly for our teachers. At the same time, for those of you who know class, I can imagine even in that short snippet, you were sort of noticing the things that she was doing that were positive climate, that were regard for student perspective. So I think that's a part of our message today, is so much of what educators already know is good practice can translate into the online learning, can translate into socially distanced classrooms, but it does look a little different. So we really want to hear sort of what you all are learning about how that's looking different. So to get us started, I just want to ask each of our colleagues joining us today to introduce yourself, tell us a little bit about your program, and just spend a moment or two telling us about what school looks like in your community right now. So Elisa, I'll start with you up in DC. Oops, I think you're muted, Elisa.
Good afternoon, I apologize. Good afternoon, I am Elisa Johnson. I am the proud principal of the Apple Tree Public Learning PCS Legacy Prep Program. In our program, we have 160 preschool and pre-K students in 8 classrooms. And we started last week, so we are in our 2nd week of learning. Woo! And what our virtual, we did go 100% virtual. So what that virtual program looks like, we have teachers who provide live and recorded sessions for community connections, which some of you all may connect to morning meeting. We have read alouds, we have one-on-ones, and we also have learning labs. So those are all teacher components that are part of the program. In addition to the teacher components, we have each family has a subscription to Noggin and Sparkler, which provides additional activities for students and families. Noggin is a student-facing program, and Sparkler is a parent-facing program. So that provides other opportunities for families. And then the last component is every family was given access to the Every Child Ready at Home curriculum. And what that curriculum does is it provides activities, daily activities for families to engage in that don't really require technology. And so what we try to incorporate, or what our program does, is it incorporates a lot of components depending on the family and what their access is with technology and what their level of comfort is. It gives them a variety to engage with technology, but also if they're just not tech savvy and they feel better about, working on the activities at home, they have the Every Child Ready curriculum that they can work with. So we've definitely seen a balance in that across in the 2 weeks. Like I said, we're in our second week. We're off and running. Teachers are doing their live sessions, but also families are engaging in the curriculums and starting to use the Noggin and Sparklers as systems as well.
Wonderful. Thank you, Elisa. I have so many questions, but I'm going to hold them. So let's go down to Florida. And Annabelle, tell us how things are in Miami-Dade.
Hi, good afternoon. So I am Annabelle Espinosa. I'm the Director of Research and Evaluation for the Early Learning Coalition of Miami-Dade and Monroe. Those of you who are familiar with coalitions in Florida, we are the financial intermediary for the Child Care Development Grant dollars. In Florida, we call it school readiness. It is the child care funding that allows parents to return to work and still access high quality early care and education. We also are the financial intermediary for our pre-K entitlement program. All of our Florida residents who are 4 by September 1st of that program year are eligible for a free pre-K instruction throughout the academic year. So from August through June, and there's also summer options. And so in my role in particular, we provide support to over 1,400 early care and education programs. And these vary. They could be early child care homes. They could be Head Start or early Head Start programs. They could also be child care centers, private and public, and those working out of our public school system. So we work very closely with teachers, and we have a big team of coaches that represent each of our programs. So hopefully I'll be able to share a little bit about what our experiences has been supporting both teachers in the programs that we partner with, as well as some of the interactions and engagements we've had with families who receive these early care and education dollars from us.
Wonderful. Thank you, Annabelle. And I think from prior conversations, it sounds like because you support so many programs, they're probably in a range of situations in terms of fully open versus closed. So we'll come back to that. Drew, going up north to Michigan, tell us a little bit about yourself, what you do, and what things are looking like on the ground for you right now.
Absolutely. Hello, everyone. My name is Drew O'Connor, and I am from Traverse City, Michigan. So our program services children in 10 counties in Northwest Michigan. We are an early Head Start and Head Start program. So we have home-based early Head Start, child care early Head Start, preschool child care programs, and then we also run our own preschool classrooms, and we have 37 of those across 10 counties. There's a lot of travel in our program. There's a lot of videotaping for coaching because we would be on the road a lot if we didn't have that aspect of our program. We serve 1,120 children, birth through 5, and with our home-based program right now, our Early Head Start home-based program, they are just starting to go into the home and do home visits. During the summer, it was all virtual, but now they're starting to do that or meeting outside to do those home visits. But the goal is by late fall, they'll be doing the home visits in the home on a regular basis. Our childcare programs that we partner with have started. They have been running this summer, and so everything has been going fairly well there in them being able to stay open. And then for our preschool classrooms, we are going to be starting at the end of September, and we are going to have 8 children in person, and then 5 children will be virtual. So we're doing a little bit of a combination depending on what the family has asked for. And then our hope is by around November 1st, we will have all 18 children enrolled in person. But we wanted to start out a little slow just to have our staff feel comfortable with the changes, with the routines, the safety piece in place, and then slowly start adding children in as the weeks go by.
Wonderful. Thanks, Drew. Again, sort of mishmash across all the various models, even within a single program, which we know everybody is feeling. All right, so let's get to the heart of it. So really at the heart of class, at the heart of what I believe and do is relationships. Relationships are the core of our humanity, the core of how we connect, and they are so critical to our children right now. I think maybe just in the chat, take a moment, because I think it helps to situate ourselves in this moment. Maybe just chat a person right now who is serving as a positive relationship for you, who is helping you carry through during this time. And I can say for myself, one of those is actually my 13-year-old. He's 13, and but what I love about him is he just reminds me. He makes me laugh. He makes me cry, and he reminds me of how important this work is. So I'll sort of call out Oliver in this moment. But as you guys are chatting that and thinking about relationships, let's talk about what strategies you're using on the ground to support relationships in this new way. So Elisa, maybe since you're sort of closest, you run a program, you're a principal, why don't we start with you? What are some of the things that you're asking your teachers to do and what really seems to be working in the area of relationships? Oops, you're muted.
One of our biggest components that we've really focused on is the social emotional learning. I know a lot of people mentioned that as a concern and a focus for that. So we really have tried to assess students' needs, assess students' interests, and incorporate those into the instruction that we provide, but we also incorporate every session of our community connections, include social emotional learning, so that that social emotional learning is addressed and approach. In our community connections, there are 3 components. It is the connection to self, connection to others, and connection to learning. And by focusing on that, we help children to understand their own selves, their emotions, how to deal with them, how to deal with their peers, how to problem solve. And that helps to build those relationships and help them to function. In addition to, teachers also do one-on-ones. We provide each child 2 one-on-ones a week. And those are used as opportunities for relationship building between the child and the student, but also it allows us to meet the student where they are and really help to foster what they need and the family needs at that time. So really focusing on social emotional learning as a key factor in everything that we do, we find is essential and an integral part of what we do. Go ahead.
Yeah, no, I think that's great. And I think so one of the things I hear, we all know curriculum is helpful, right? It provides a grounding for our teachers. So you're finding ways to bring your curriculum alive, even in a virtual setting, and doing some of those sort of social emotional activities in the context of virtual learning. But I also really love to hear sort of working on the time and making time to touch every student in a one-on-one. I think that if I had to sort of have a single thing that was maybe the most important that everybody should be doing right now at the beginning of the year, it is that. And knowing, and I'm sure you guys are experiencing this, that sometimes that's going to be easy. And sometimes it's going to be hard to reach the students, but making extra efforts, especially with the students who we know it's harder to reach out so that we have that one-on-one time is just so critical. Annabelle, I'm curious to hear you talk a little bit about how you're supporting educators, whether they be teachers or coaches, as you think about this piece of relationships.
Definitely. I think when we talk about building relationships, oftentimes because we're working with adults, we can neglect, how important that is as well. And our provider community has, like many of us, I had many questions about how is the right way to engage in virtual learning. How do they lead it? How do they support it? And so our coaches and our mentors have had to kind of take their training and use it for some of these very fundamental technology pieces, because we don't want to operate out of the assumption that all our teachers are comfortable and knowledgeable using these virtual platforms, even though we may have been using these platforms to meet, with colleagues for quite some time. And so what many of our coaches are doing is that they're reaching out to providers, and rather than engaging them how we typically would via, phone conversations, when they reach out for support, we let them know, I'm going to send you a Zoom right now. And it kind of, throws them off a little bit. Not everyone, especially in the very beginning of the pandemic, but over time, it really became a safe space for them to troubleshoot. And initially they would push off or be a little resistant and say, no, can we just talk on the phone? And what we asked our coaches to do was just kind of really be welcoming and create the space so that the provider could feel comfortable talking and say, I would love to talk to you on the phone, but there's just so many things that are happening right now that it's easier if I show you, and I want to show you visuals, and I can do that with Zoom. And so they over time they would concede, and then by the end of the meeting, they would be like, this is great. I'm so glad we were able to connect this way. I feel our screen because we were able to show them the form and also answer any questions that they maybe don't feel comfortable asking in other settings where they're expected to be the lead or the facilitator. So asking us like, how do I use the chat box, or, how do I turn off my video? And sometimes we would introduce the meeting like that, like, oh, let's play around with some of these features on Zoom, and kind of step away from our role as coaches and mentors of a particular area. My team focused primarily on inclusion and kind of work on being a coach and mentor of the technology and the digital devices, because that sometimes is our biggest barrier. When we feel like we don't have the competence to participate in one of these meetings, we just don't. I know my parents immigrated to this country in their 20s before I was born, but they didn't speak the language. And so whenever parent-teacher conferences would come up, they would immediately say, you don't need me for that, and luckily we weren't students that required a lot of discipline. Teachers just wanted to get to know them. So it wasn't that awful. But now as a parent myself, I think, wow, my parents had a lot to contribute and they just didn't feel like they could because they didn't speak the language. And so I use that empathy. You said the word empathy. We use that empathy, and we remind our coaches and our mentors that a lot of our teachers have this deep desire to engage their students, to be in a classroom with their students. They can't right now. What we have is these digital platforms, these virtual platforms, and they may not feel comfortable using them. And so it's really our job to make it more accessible to teachers so that they can then feel confident leading their students or working with families.
I love that, Annabelle. I love that. And I love, all the best coaches always rely on modeling. And I love how you're sort of describing, I'm sure Drew is thinking about this as well, is thinking about how to use this video platform as a way to model in it. And so that's just such a great piece of advice. I'm also aware of how just simple innovations can then spread across an organization. At Teachstone, one of the things we started doing is recognizing that just as people join a Zoom, saying hello, using their names actually is a very powerful thing. And it's so simple, but now across almost every meeting I go into, people do that, and it just sets a tone for the meeting. So I think that idea of modeling and spreading sort of local innovation is so powerful. You also said something that I'm going to sort of then pitch to Drew, because you were talking about your own experience and your parents' experience not speaking English and the sort of distance that creates. And I'm just curious, I think one of the things we know is always there are inequities in relationships across students for a variety of reasons, whether those be language or race or cultural divides. And I'm concerned, and I think lots of people in the world are concerned right now that those inequities are getting bigger, whether it's because people don't have access to technology, language barriers, et cetera. So Drew, I'm just curious, as you think about relationships and supporting relationships between teachers and families and children in your setting, what are you thinking about in this space of making sure there's equity for all the children in your program?
Yeah, it is such a great question and an important piece for us to be thinking about as program leaders. I think that the modeling of that comes from the leaders, definitely, and the expectations that everyone is treated with respect and getting to know each family and each child and respecting where they are developmentally. All of our children are at different developmental levels, have different skills and knowledge coming in, and that's the same with our parents. And the more we can relate to them and understand and listen to their story, we tell our teachers all the time, listen to the family stories. So one thing we're doing a little differently this year is we are having our orientation and home visit combined this year, and we're bringing in one family at a time with their child into the classroom to get to know them on a one-on-one basis, get to know their thoughts and their ideas. And our biggest thing that we want families to walk away with is that they are safe in our program, that we are going to listen to them, that we are going to keep their child safe as much as possible. We have amazing safety plans that we have put together that all the teams have created based on their resources and their building, and sharing that with the families right off bat, right at the beginning, letting them know what we have thought of in helping them feel comfortable with everything that is going on, and letting them know what we have put in place to keep their children safe while they're coming to school with us. The trainings that we provide, the knowledge that we pass on to our staff, we use conscious discipline as our social emotional curriculum. We use the class as a guide for everything that we do. So we have 4 staff in our classrooms. We're very fortunate to have 4 staff and 18 children. And so we are able to, really connect with children. Whereas if you only had 2, that's challenging. So to have those 4 and keep each other in check and making sure relationships are staying healthy and that children are being looked at equally and in the classroom. And then we also provide reflective practice to our teachers so that they can talk about, their feelings in working with different families and children, and getting to the root of that. So that's helping them in their social emotional growth and acceptance and understanding in working with people from all different walks of life, because everybody comes in to the classroom with their own culture, with their own thoughts and ways of doing things. And when we listen to that and hear those stories, it builds that compassion and understanding.
I love that idea. And one of the things that I've often said of late is I think sometimes the class, because it is a measure that's used at the classroom level, doesn't get down to that level of the individual experience of children. And so you all are really highlighting the ways in which we need to take the principles from the class, the relationships, the sensitivity, and make sure we're applying them to every child in the classroom, sort of regardless of where they come from. And I will sort of pitch, if you didn't see it, we had an amazing webinar with Yoma Ruka talking about sort of culturally responsive and equitable teaching practices. She's a phenomenal speaker that is up on our website. I'd highly recommend those who want to sort of dig into their own thoughts and ideas in this space a little bit more. So let's move on and assume that we sort of have some relationships on board, but one of the greatest challenges we know right now is how do we actually engage children, especially, there's lots of ways to take that question, but let's just start sort of here in this virtual space. And we saw it in the video, right? I think of my own children. They were actually sitting right here that day in 2 chairs. Julia and Lucia are my daughters. And they were trying to do the yoga. I wasn't actually here. I was at our home office, but my babysitter, who's probably my other savior right now, was here with them. And they told me later they were trying to figure out how to do the yoga so that their teacher could see them, but so that they didn't, fall on top of each other, right? You just saw the teacher really working to try to engage and keep the children interested. So what's really working as we think about this space of engaging students, 4-year-olds in online learning, Drew? I think all of us can start at a basis of saying this is not a long-term solution. We don't imagine preschool should be virtual, right? But it is for now. So what are your teachers, your coaches learning about how they can engage children in this setting?
So I think the biggest thing to go in with the right mindset is for the teachers to be realistic with this. If they can engage a child for 5 minutes and really get some good interaction during that time, they have to be okay with that. They have to understand that, you know, trying to keep a child engaged for a half hour with them running all over and, you know, the iPad falling on the floor and all of that, that's not quality time. So we have not put a limit on the time frame for the home visits, the virtual home visits that are taking place. So, you know, if you can engage a child for 10 minutes, that's great. And if it can be a little bit longer, that's great. We have created lesson plans that are very intentional for the teachers to think about. What are they going to be planning? Where is that child developmentally? What needs do they have? And all of that happens with the conversations that they're having with the families, the questions that they're asking, the screener that they're doing as soon as possible to see where they are developmentally, but then also to get to know the interests of the children. So if a child is really interested in dinosaurs, you know that's a way to grab their attention. So what questions are you asking the family right at the beginning? What are your child's interests? What's going to make them really want to sit down with me and engage? So find out what their interests are. Do that intentional lesson planning where you're really thinking about developmentally where the child is. We also, our program purchased totes for our families. So we're using the Ready Rosie curriculum for our virtual experience. And we took their list of items that they recommend for families to have in the home. And then we added to it because we use the creative curriculum. And we're creating these totes that every family will get with activities or materials in there, so that will be the child's special little box when they sit down with a teacher to do a virtual home visit or a classroom visit. To get in there and to find some things, the teacher will be able to have that as kind of a hook to get them to sit down with them. You know, and it really is a team effort. This isn't one teacher that's going to be taking on the virtual piece. So it's going to be really working as a team and coming up with great ideas. We have a guidance on virtual learning, giving the teachers lots of different ways to engage the children through fun, you know, songs and movement activities. You don't want it all to be sitting activities because you will lose those preschoolers' attention. So getting up and moving and doing those kind of activities, but just getting to know the child, what their interests are, and using that as a way to get them to sit and listen for a little while with you.
I was thinking as you were talking that, you know, yes, there's this virtual space and many people are sort of commenting, but we're also in person. And so we know many of the things that you're describing are also relevant for those of you who are in sort of socially distanced but open programs, but also you're calling out of that opportunity when another opportunity for modeling, right? Whether it's home visiting or just a first visit that teachers make, or having the parents come to the school, where doing things like reading a book together is an opportunity to show them the materials, but also transfer a bit of practice around what are things parents can be doing to engage children in the activities that you're sending home. So lots of opportunities to be intentional about our interactions. What about, Elisa, what about for you as you think about engagement? What's sort of top of your mind? What are the things, if you had a checklist, which I think Appletree is working on, a checklist of things you'd be looking for your teachers to be doing to engage children, what would you be looking for?
So definitely connected to a lot of what Drew mentioned. I think definitely multiple modalities. As we know, even in face-to-face learning, that is important. But in the virtual world, we really look at what do you have in every lesson that is including children in multiple modalities. And in addition to the platform that we use is Dojo with regards to communication, but there are virtual equity sticks, there are reinforcement systems, there is a noise maker. And so all of those features using a platform that helps to escalate that or complement that is very good. So including modalities, and one thing I say to my teachers is enthusiasm. So you have to be over and above in your dramatism because it is virtual and you are sitting at a computer and the child is sitting at the computer and they need to see and feel your enthusiasm. So go above and beyond in how you present. Planning and everything can be perfectly planned out, but if you don't have the enthusiasm and the actions yourself, that is going to be definitely a key component. So I would say that. And then the other thing is the connection. So we make sure that what we teach in our live sessions is connected to what they may be doing on their own in activities or in the asynchronous, so that they can make connections and know that, oh, I did that, or I did this when I was doing it on the app. But also we use that as opportunities for children to talk. So they may share, what did they do when they were doing centers at home, because at my campus, we do virtual centers for children, and that provides them choice. And part of the question may be, what are you choosing to do? What are you going to do in centers today? And then they may come back and talk about what they did. And so that helps really them make connection, be involved. Also, just as a check, not necessarily check for teachers, but we also encourage teachers to include families in activities, because it is difficult sometimes for the parent is just sitting there watching the child participate. And so we say, think of activities that the parent can engage in as well. Not a requirement, because all children don't have an adult there with them that can be there with them, but if they are, provide that opportunity so that you have that deeper connection, and the family can also assist and help with that.
I love that example, because in some ways you're talking about sort of building off a silver lining of the moment, right? It's a challenge, and not all parents, I can't be there always with my kids, but some parents can, and we actually even saw that in the video. So how do you not make them feel excluded, but actually make them feel a part of the opportunity? And if we do that, then we know that children will be more engaged for sure. I was also thinking, as you were talking, we always, from the beginning, our coaching work has always been about watching yourself. So really encouraging the use of video. And I know people are doing this now, but I think of one of the things we talk about when we talk about coaching is when you're teaching, you're using all of your mental space to think about what you're doing. So it's often hard to take the time to observe children's experiences and reactions. And I sort of expect that's on hyperdrive right now. Teachers in this moment don't have a lot of capacity probably to even be paying attention to all of the various sort of Hollywood squares. But there is an opportunity in filming Zoom sessions or whatever to be able to go back and look and watch yourself teach and watch others and watch how the children are responding. I don't know, I didn't prep you guys for this question, but anybody sort of thinking about that and having teachers watch themselves teach in this kind of Zoom setting?
So we do, at our campus, we do record even our live sessions for coaching purposes, but also to provide for families that may not be available to see the live session. So we do record all of those, and we have them, each teacher has them organized. So we do have those opportunities, and teachers have the opportunities to go back and use and reflect and figure out, also going forward for next sessions, to determine how to move forward with next lessons. But yes, we do that as a coaching component in our program.
Great. All right, so we know that relationships and communication with families are critical, and I've heard each and every one of you sort of talk about that, but let's focus for a little bit on those families that are harder to reach. What strategies are you using to support your families who are really struggling right now to even connect to the classroom in any sort of meaningful way because of the stresses and strains that they're in? Annabelle, what's that looking like for you down in Miami?
So we started early in the pandemic. We partnered with our local behavior health agency, Citrus Health, and we created a series of short webinars, 30 to 45 minutes, talking about different areas that we were hearing that parents needed more support on. Managing relationships with their partners during a pandemic. Early on, we were like put inside, our homes for extended period of time with partners, with extended family members. And these were relationships we weren't used to managing. So we provided short webinars that would allow parents to kind of check in around noon after what we believed a lot of the academic instruction at that time would already be over. And they were able to tune in that way. We've also hosted a series of virtual story times where we, through Zoom, invited parents to join us while we read books and engaged children in back and forth conversations. And I think we've also amped up just the multiple modalities that we're using. We're texting families. We're not just calling them, we're texting them, we're sending them emails, we're releasing news blasts, we're on Instagram and Facebook, you know, sharing what are some of the new things that are happening, and we're focusing on different departments every day. So one week we may be highlighting our early Head Start team, another week we may be highlighting our warm line and our inclusion work. But with the idea, just reminding parents that we're there to answer questions, we're there to provide support. Many of our call center agents and our warm line specialists quickly went into overdrive. Typically, we answer questions about childcare, but early in the pandemic, we were answering questions about where the food distribution centers were, what centers, you know, were open, but also what do I do if my child isn't receiving any instruction or guidance from their teacher? You know, early in the pandemic, we had very varied ways of providing instruction. And so we've just had to be really nimble and kind of meet parents where they are. We encourage them, if they can't jump on a Zoom, meeting through WhatsApp or meeting through the Apple platform, FaceTime, meeting through FaceTime. And so we find that a lot of families, you know, may not be comfortable, you know, with phone conversations, but if you send them a text, they'll respond immediately. Or if you send them a link to short snippets of activities that they can do with their child, they'll respond. One of our sister coalitions did that a lot, just kind of did short 4 to 10-minute videos on, you know, reading to your child, or, you know, how to focus on blending, or, you know, verbs, you know, just little short snippets that helped families who didn't have a lot of time, but who really wanted to support their children, and they had questions.
I think that's great. I really hear you being flexible and thinking about all the different ways to reach families, starting where they are. One other thing I will just say, as when I wear my sort of parent hat, that's been helpful going into this year compared to the end of last, was just on the communication, the organization of that and the clarity. So in class terms, we often think of instructional learning formats as something a teacher does to engage children, but I think there's a real role right now for schools and for teachers to organize information and expectations for families really clearly, because it's really hard to even know what it is you're supposed to be doing to support your children. So Drew, I'm curious, does that sort of resonate with you, or other things that are on your mind as you think about your work with families?
Yeah, this is a challenge, and I think that what happened to us in the spring, you know, everybody in our program anyway was in person, and so when it all became virtual, it took everyone by surprise, including the families, of course. Starting now in the fall, the families that are signing up for the virtual know that that's what they're signing up for, so they're going into it with a little bit different mindset than what we had in the spring. So I think that's going to be a little bit helpful with that parent participation. But when we have those families that aren't engaging, it really is a matter of finding out the why. You know, there's a reason that they're not connecting with you. So having those conversations about, you know, is it the technology that's getting in the way? We did purchase iPads for our virtual families and internet cards, so we know that they'll have that access, which they didn't have in the spring. Is it the time factor? Do we need to do our home visits more in the evening? Do I need to maybe have 2 or 3 classroom meetings a week so that we can meet people's schedules? So it's with those hard to reach families, there's a why behind they're not responding. So the more you can build that trust and have those conversations to find that out, you can break down those barriers. Annabelle, you were talking about emailing and texting and phone. I heard an interesting information the other day that families where there's parents 30 and under, they love to text. So if you text them, more than likely they're going to respond. If you're working with families 30 to 50 years old, they love email. They're going to respond with emails much more. And if you're working with families over 50, like me, we love to pick up that phone and we love to give you a call. So just having our teachers understand a little bit of those things like that sets them up for success in reaching those families that might not be responding. So it takes time to know the why behind it, but it's important to find it out because we want to still reach those families and help them.
I love that. And we started out talking about empathy and the role of empathy. And I really love I read some article at one point about the levels of different kinds of empathy, and there's this idea of compassionate empathy, which moves from not just sort of a shared feeling, but action. And so that's really what I hear all of you saying, is it's important to find out the why, but not just to be there as somebody who understands, but actually to be motivated towards action to help make their situation easier in a very challenging time. So I try to carry that compassionate empathy with me. Actually, that transitions us very well to the last topic for today, which is compassion for our educators, to all of you, but particularly to the teachers. Everything we've talked about today is new and hard, and being on Zoom is hard and exhausting. So Elisa, as a leader, what are you doing to make sure that your teachers have the sort of well-being and sort of time on their own to get through this really challenging time?
So we surveyed our staff to see what they needed, what would be wellness for them. And so we created a wellness committee, and that committee comes up with ideas and suggestions for the campus, but we also incorporate the Legacy Cafe. And Legacy Cafe is, usually when you're in person, you go and you see everybody, you stop and drink coffee in the teacher's lounge. So we opened up the Legacy Cafe, and that's available in the mornings before the day starts for people just to drop in and say good morning to their colleagues. We start every meeting with a mindful minute or a mindful moment. We have campus challenge, fitness challenges where we challenge each other to do things together, outings. So those types of things, definitely we try to work to help provide that balance, but also serve as a out for when when a teacher needs to just express themselves. But in general, I think focusing on innovation and allowing teachers to be able to speak and share their voice and have that venue to do that is very important, because if they're stressed, then the classrooms can't function where they need to function. And so definitely giving them that opportunity and coming up with a plan for how to help them address that is very important.
I love that as a leader, you started with asking them, because I think we can always make assumptions about what teachers or families want in that space. So really starting with what they wanted. So we just have like a minute or two. Drew or Annabelle, any innovations that you're doing to take care of your teachers and educators during this time?
Well, our early Head Start team has a disabilities manager, a mental health manager, and they created a support group where teachers and providers can get together and get their feelings validated, any fears or concerns they're experiencing about this time. And they also discuss ways to identify, address, and reduce stress and fears in the support group. So that has been really helpful. We also offer weekly provider meetings to our providers, to our teachers in the community, that they can just they're like chats. They're not anything very formal. We send them the Zoom link, and we allow providers to meet with us on a weekly basis and just ask questions, share what's worked for them. Many providers take that opportunity to tell us about, some of the innovations they've made if they're doing any face-to-face learning. It's also an opportunity where they can share any connections they made. We have our Florida Association for Infant Mental Health. They launched a campaign called Faces Are Essential, and they're sharing clear masks so that teachers, particularly in infant toddler classrooms, but really in all our classrooms, have the opportunity to still show their students their face, their facial expressions as they're teaching, because as Elisa pointed out, enthusiasm is so, so important. It was when we were teaching face-to-face, it continues to be in these virtual platforms.
Thanks, Annabelle. Well, we could keep going, and I've seen throughout people posting other wonderful ideas about things to do. One of the great things that these amazing women did for me beyond appearing for this hour is they worked with their teams just to give us a list of some of their practices that they're learning. We're going to share that out in a couple of days. And maybe try to incorporate some of the good ideas I've seen in the chat as well. I think this is a time where we as an organization really want to be here to serve the community. And one of the ways we can do that is be a place where we're gathering ideas and sharing those out rapidly through our community and other sources. So as Liz sort of comes back and just closes out this webinar, I will say just on that last topic, we will be having a webinar later in the month or early in October on CARE, which is a program about taking care of teachers themselves with Mark Greenberg, a sort of leading expert in the space. So stay tuned on that. And then my great colleagues at Miami-Dade invited me to this session just in a couple of weeks. So Annabelle, you want to tell us just a little bit about this event?
Sure. This is our annual conference. Typically, we host around 1,000 providers face-to-face. It becomes like their professional development day. We have over 60 sessions and everyone has the opportunity to meet and network. This year's a little different because it's going to be virtual, but still really exciting. We have, from participating, you have the opportunity to earn CEUs. You'll still have the opportunity to connect and network with other providers and other teachers from all around, we're hoping all around the country, but definitely all around the state. We have 4 learning tracks this year. One is completely in Spanish. So if you have teachers whose native language is Spanish and they're really interested in kind of growing their knowledge base and just their skill set, they can do so in Spanish in their native language. We have an entire track. We have Bridget Amre, who's going to be joining one of our featured speakers, and Iroma Aruca, who she spoke about a little bit earlier, who was on another one of the Teachstone webinars. She's going to be leading our conversations around equity and cultural responsiveness, and a slew of other folks. We have the CEO of the Council for Professional Recognition, Dr. Calvin Moore. He's going to be our keynote speaker. And we're just really exciting. I feel badly because I want to name everybody who's going to be there. There's going to be a lot of great folks there. It is going to start at 8 a.m. You can see it on the flyers from 8 to 12. There'll be a lot of built-in breaks. There'll be raffles. And I see everyone, you know, is always curious about certificates and CEUs. You'll definitely get that in return. So we're hopeful that everyone joins us.
Wonderful. It's one of the great things, right? A lot of people couldn't have traveled to Miami, but they can come and visit this free event. So we'll make sure to send out the information for enrolling in that to everybody who's on the webinar today. And really quick.
Sorry, I know I'm short on time, but there'll also be videos and snippets of teachers leading virtual activities, music and book readings and storybooks, all sorts of great visuals for everyone to see.
Wonderful. All right, I'm going to turn it back over to my colleague Liz to close us out today. But thank you to all of you. Huge kudos. Thank you for your work. And I look forward to checking in with you a few months down the road.
Thank you, Bridget. Thank you, everyone. I know we have just a couple minutes left. I want to share really quickly. There were many questions about recordings, wanting to share all of this with your colleagues. We will send an email tomorrow where you'll get a link. On that link, you'll have a recording of this, you'll have a certificate of attendance, and you'll have all of the resources that I'm going to run out of time and not be able to share with you. But one thing I will try and put a pitch in is I manage our class learning community. It is a free resource to anyone. And so there will be a link on that landing page. We encourage anyone to join. It's a great place to sort of continue this conversation. If you have questions, I know there were a couple of really good questions in the Q&A about schedules and timeframes and age levels. And so the class learning community would be a great place to sort of continue that conversation. If you haven't been on our website recently, I encourage you to take a look and sort of poke around. There is a lot of new guidance out for observers, observing in virtual settings, observing in in-person teaching, and also for teachers, like by dimension, what do effective interactions look like both in virtual and either socially or physically distanced classrooms. So definitely take a look, and there will be links to that on the website that we send out tomorrow as well. There are a couple new solutions out there, half-day trainings and on-demand coaching that we'll also mention, trying to go as fast as possible. And a shout out to this, our trauma-informed training. The name that you kept hearing that did our incredible webinar on trauma-informed care, Yoma. She also was a subject matter expert in this trauma-informed course. And it's a 6-module course that really takes a much deeper dive. And so if you saw the hour-long webinar or see her at the conference that's coming up and want more Yoma, that's a great place to get it. If you are one of the newer to class or the teachers that chimed in the poll earlier, this is another great option. We have a online Class Foundations for Teachers course. You can sort of take the gamut of all four and or do a really sort of high level overview. I encourage you to take a look at those. And of course, my Teachstone. Oh my goodness, there's so much. Okay, well, thank you. We will certainly send all of that in the information tomorrow. And as soon as we have a shareable version of everything that they submitted, we will make sure to share that widely in the class learning community and on that landing page. And I just have one last poll I'll put up. And so if any of those things you're like, wait, you went so quickly, I want someone to reach out to me and talk to me about maybe Class Foundations, maybe the trauma-informed coursework, we are happy to do that. Just click yes, and someone will follow up with you from Teachstone. Otherwise, thank you so much. And thank you to all of our panelists for their time. I know time feels tricky to find these days, and so we super appreciate it.
Yes, thank you to all of you, and thank you to everyone out there listening to this just for the work you do every day. And just know it makes a difference, and we know it's hard, and let us know what we can do to support you. So thank you all, and have a lovely rest of your day.
I'll leave the poll up here for just one more minute.